to my channel Beyond Faces. My name is Moses Abukutsa. It's a beautiful time to be here again. I just want to thank God that I'm alive, and everyone out there, I thank God for you that you are alive. It's a beautiful time to be alive, and it is by the grace of God that we are alive. I just want to welcome you again to Beyond Faces, my channel. And on this channel we share stories, we have conversations, we tell stories, and we grow together as we learn new knowledge from old knowledge and from new knowledge. Basically, we interact on this channel about life. So I want to welcome you. Today I have remembered my father. If you look at a previous video I made about my father, I told the story of him going to the US, or rather the story of him receiving an invitation to be an exchange student in the US, which did not materialize, and his life was affected. I want to imagine I'm making the right conclusion by saying that, and this is my personal opinion, by saying that I observed that my father's life was not particularly a happy life. One who, I can say from my observation of him that his life looked like it had not been happy from what I saw. In fact, it is in very, let me not say rare occasions, I never saw my father display affection with my mother in any way. And we seemed to live in utter fear when we were children about my father. That's not to say he was a great dad. He was a great dad. He was a great father. But somehow, I think maybe it is a thing with parents of that time. They, especially the fathers, they adopted a way of bringing up children that was particularly strict, harsh, and they employed a lot of militaristic tactics to instill discipline. So we lived when we were children in fear and awe of my father. In fact, I started speaking to my father openly and without fear as an adult when I went into college. But previously, I had never had a conversation with my father. And one of the things that happened during this time I was almost finalizing college is that my father was diagnosed with diabetes, and that diagnostic of diabetes started affecting his health in one way or another. And when his health began to deteriorate, I became closer to him because I became a lot of help to him during that time of his sickness, especially towards the last days of his life. Actually, diabetes ravaged him to the extent that he was losing his sight. But as I looked at my father and I reflected the years I had lived with him, and as among my siblings, I am the one that went to live with my father, where he used to work, because at that time he worked away from home in our village. And what happened is that one time I was about between 5 and 6. He came to visit home on a weekend, and when he was leaving, I started crying and following him towards the gate. So he took my hand and came back and told my mother to prepare me. He was living with me, and that's how I left the village to start living with my father, where he was working in a school as a teacher. So that was my first experience of leaving home, but that is a story I'll tell another day. But from that childhood, I remember in rare occasions seeing my father happy and just talking to us as children, sharing his experiences when we were children. Our relationship was, and particularly myself, was a relationship of the kind that I was receiving orders from him only, and nothing else. So I revered him, feared him, and lived in a world where I wondered what kind of person he was. So that childhood experience with my father proceeded from there into adulthood, where I started this story and said that at that time I now started reflecting the way we had lived as a family. And mark you, we lived in an extended family home, and with an extended family home there are challenges. So we surmounted some challenges left scars on our hearts, and the scars have healed over time in life as we grow. But it was a challenging time, because I remember in one of those Decembers, my mother suddenly fell sick, and it was quite serious that she had to be hospitalized. And later it was discovered that she had contracted typhus. That causes typhoid. I think it's a bacteria or something. I might not really remember what it is, but it is the thing that causes typhoid. Let me put it like that. So she had not only contracted typhoid, but she had cerebral malaria. Yeah, cerebral malaria. So after her hospitalization, she stayed in the hospital for almost a month. It was quite a difficult period, and we were children. We understood there was something wrong, but we didn't understand the magnitude of it until my mother came out of hospital and frail, recovering, but having lost her speech. So at one point in our life, my mother had to start learning how to speak, and being a teacher also, she had to stay away from work for a whole month to relearn how to write and to speak. So because of the cerebral malaria, she had lost her abilities to speak and her abilities to write. But I digress again. That's a story for another day. I'm just trying to express my reflections of our childhood and the background of my father's whole demeanor that I realized had never been happy. And he seemed to walk around with a weight on his shoulder that I quite did not understand until we started sharing stories. And it was during one of the trips I was taking him to hospital at the time when he had become partially blind, that I learned the magnitude of and the reason why he had become what he was. And at this juncture, I remember one particular story he shared with me at that time I was taking him to hospital. He told me when he was in college, he had campaigned for a position, and he had a friend who had all his secrets and all that he was planning, only for him to betray my father, and my father lost that position. So it is from such experiences and the experiences I shared in another video where he lost his opportunity to go and study in Ohio State University in the US as an exchange student. Those are the things, as I learned in adulthood, contributed to him becoming the person he was. As I have given a disclaimer in this video, that he was not a reckless father. He was not an irresponsible father per se, but he was a man who was quite detached from me. I don't know what my siblings would say, but I had a son-father relationship that was quite strained, and those formative years were quite challenging for me. And being a firstborn child for my parents, the pressures that come with that responsibility were not in short supply in my father's demands towards me. And I couldn't understand why my father was quite hard on me, even in situations that looked quite unnecessary for him to be hard on me. But he would really come down hard on me. That was, as I later came to learn, of course, expected. But there was always something extra in his expensing of parental guidance and discipline. There was always something extra, like a bitterness with life that crowned every of his expensing of his parental duty towards especially myself as a son. So maybe I think he expected that I should become what he had not become, and that he wanted to live himself in me. I'm just thinking he probably wanted to correct his mistakes in me. I think that many parents end up doing, maybe voluntarily or involuntarily. So I been reflecting on these things, and that's one of the things I point to. And I cannot blame him for that, since life had been unfair to him, to be honest, and it had served him meals he had not ordered for in his menu of experiences. So as we interacted in his later years of life, towards the end of his life, I began to understand where he had come from. Of course, plus the stories he was sharing with me, I began to understand. At that point when he was blind, at that point when I would read a newspaper for him, and we would talk politics, states of the country at that time. We would talk relationships. He would advise me that I should, when I want to get married, I should never, when I want to marry, sorry, I should never marry a woman who is not working. That it was very important that I listen to that. And he, at this juncture of life, was very encouraging to me. He was quite the opposite of what I had known in childhood. He had so many humorous tales about his own experiences. Like one experience he shared is that he had taken a loan one time in a commercial bank that time and had defaulted. And when the debt collectors came for him in school, he had to tell the secretary to inform the debt collectors that that man you are looking for is long dead, he no longer lives. So he had such anecdotes of his life that started bringing me closer to him, and he now started opening up to me. So my father, at the end of his life, was totally a different person I had known in my childhood. A person I had revered out of fear, someone I had looked at in awe, and someone I had hidden so much from him because of the fear I had of him and the fear he drove down my spine. It so happened that I would always avoid him in childhood at that time. So my father eventually, during those last days, was sharing wisdom and regretting a number of things he had not done in life. But he was a proud man that he had set up his children with an education, despite the challenges he had in paying our fees, despite the challenges we had as a family. He was quite confident of his role having been done, and he was ready to go to his ancestors, as he always said, what have I not done? At least I have you children, I have educated you, I have nothing else, I have seen it all, I have had my fun in the world, so even if I go now, I am at peace. So eventually in the year 2011 in January, one afternoon when I was reclining on my bed in my room, one of my sisters came rushing in and said that there's something going on in my father's house that I need to go and see. So I rushed out, but I, of course, told my sister that she was an alarmist. There was nothing that was going to happen. Let her relax. So when I entered my father's house, I found my father sprawled on his bed, speechless, and just staring, his eyes wide open, and he was breathing hard. So we immediately took action. We, of course, looked for help for him to be transported to hospital. When we arrived in hospital, it was declared he was in a semi-coma, and he had to be admitted. So he was admitted, and I had to be by his bedside waiting for him to recover. So in the first night of his hospitalization, he recovered, spoke to me one or two things, then relapsed into the semi-coma. The following morning, the doctors came. They told me and my family that my father needed a kidney dialysis actually. His kidneys were failing. So we had to get help together with our extended family, and we sought for an ambulance to get the services in the nearest hospital. The hospital we were in did not have a dialysis machine. In those days, dialysis machines were in limitation. So we tried to get to the next hospital. The next hospital was fully booked for other patients. The machines were fully booked for dialysis for the other patients. So we made a decision quickly that we are going to move to the next town, which was about 150 kilometers away from where we were, because we had a doctor who was a relative and had told us in that town he knew where we could get a place or a hospital with a space for dialysis. So we had to get a car. One of the members of the extended family made everything available, and we really are grateful and were grateful at that moment, and we set on the journey to that hospital. So on the way, as we almost arrived in that town, about maybe 30 kilometers from that town, I was sitting in the car. My father was reclining on a seat that had been made comfortable for him, and as he reclined, as I sat at his side, and one of my sisters sat on the other side, I noticed my father's legs began to shake, and he began to convulse, and he began to foam in the mouth, and this kind of a situation took about 10 to 15 minutes, if I recall. And by the end of the 10-15 minutes, he stopped convulsing and foaming, and that is how his life ended. When we arrived at the hospital we were going to, he was declared dead by a doctor. So that is the story of my father in brief. And we had a relationship with my father which was interesting right from childhood up to the time he passed away. We had a relationship I can trace the foundation and its growth and up to that maturity. I can't say I have regrets about my father, because when you grow, you begin to understand some things. When you are a child, as Paul in the Bible says, when I was a child, I thought like a child, and when I became a grown-up, I thought like a grown-up. So there are things you can think about when you are a child in a childish way, and when you grow up you understand and you start thinking like a grown-up. So I can't say I have regrets with my father. The only regret I have is that I didn't get to spend more time with him in his older age and in my adulthood. I think there are things I would have really benefited and learned from him as a father in this particular time. So that is the story of my father's death, and from where it came from, and the story of my relationship with him, and the story of us in that small family of ours, how we lived and how we had life going. So thank you for listening. I just thinking about these things because life is not all about happiness and joy. I've just been reflecting about these things because there is a part of life called grief, and it comes and is something you cannot wish away. So I'm just also thinking about someone who is going through grief, lost a parent and all that. It is something that happens. So you cherish the memories and forge ahead. So I've just been cherishing memories of my father here, and I'm grateful. Thank you for listening and watching. Welcome to Beyond Faces. Like, share, subscribe, make a comment below. Do you have memories about your father or someone you love, someone you try to understand and maybe got to understand later? You had some reflections about them. You thought about them this way in a certain time and differently. You can share what you think in the comment section. Otherwise, this has been Beyond Faces. My name is Moses Abukutsa. Keep posted for my next episode and my next story on Beyond Faces, my next conversation on this channel. Thank you.